Hey guys, tonight we're traveling back to medieval Europe. Not to the grand castles or royal banquets people love imagining, but to something much more personal and much less pleasant. Hygiene, more specifically, what it actually smelled like to live in the Middle Ages. So, before we begin, dim the lights, get comfortable. Maybe turn on a fan for soft background noise, and let tonight's journey slowly carry you into sleep. Imagine waking up in the year 1400 inside a small medieval village. The first thing you notice is not the sunrise, not birds singing, and definitely not the smell of fresh flowers drifting through clean air. No, the first thing you notice is the smell, a heavy mixture of smoke, sweat, damp straw, wet animals, mud, old clothes, and human life packed tightly together. And unfortunately, this smell is not temporary. It is simply normal. Modern people often take cleanliness for granted because we are surrounded by invisible luxuries. Running water, soap in every bathroom, toothpaste, shampoo, laundry detergent, showers, deodorant, plumbing, waste disposal. Medieval people had none of these conveniences in the way we understand them today. That does not mean they never cleaned themselves. This is a common myth. Medieval people did care about cleanliness. The problem was that staying clean was extremely difficult. Let us begin with bathing. Most people assume medieval villagers never bathed at all. That is not entirely true. People washed when possible. They washed hands, faces, and visible parts of the body regularly enough. Wealthier people sometimes had access to bathhouses or heated bathing arrangements, but daily hot showers impossible. For most ordinary people, bathing required enormous effort. First, you needed water. That alone was work. Someone had to walk to a well, river, or stream carrying heavy buckets. Then that water had to be transported home. If warm water was desired, wood needed gathering, fire needed preparation, and water had to be heated manually. By the time all that labor finished, the idea of bathing every day suddenly felt much less realistic. And even if you did bathe, privacy barely existed. Most peasant homes had a single room shared by the entire family. There was no bathroom with a lock, no private shower, no tiled floor. Washing often happened using basins, cloths, or partial cleaning rather than full immersion. It was practical cleaning, not luxurious self-care. Then we arrive at clothing. Clothes were expensive, very expensive. Most peasants owned only a few sets of garments, sometimes just one main outfit for work and daily life. Washing clothes required water, soap, or ash mixtures, scrubbing, drying, and time. Frequent washing also wore fabrics down. Since replacing clothing was costly, garments were not washed constantly. That meant clothes absorbed everything. Sweat from work, smoke from fires, mud from roads, animal smells from barns, cooking smells from kitchens. Over time, wool and linen trapped layers of daily life in ways modern washing machines conveniently erase. Imagine wearing the same heavy wool clothing repeatedly while working fields, tending animals, cooking over fire, and sleeping in smoky rooms. And then, teeth. Now let us talk about something even less pleasant than dirty clothes. Smell, not a mild, unpleasant smell that disappears after opening a window, but the kind of smell that fully surrounds daily life until your nose eventually stops noticing it. Medieval Europe was filled with layers of odor so constant that most people likely treated them as background reality, rather than something unusual. Begin with the home itself. Most ordinary families lived inside small wooden or mud-plastered houses with limited ventilation. Windows were tiny because glass was expensive and larger openings allowed cold air inside. That meant smoke from cooking fires often lingered indoors for hours. Even when smoke escaped through roof openings, plenty remained trapped inside walls, clothes, bedding, and lungs. Over time, everything absorbed that smoke. Blankets smelled of smoke. Hair smelled of smoke. Walls smelled of smoke. Bread smelled of smoke. Even babies probably smelled faintly of smoke after spending days near the hearth. The fire was essential for warmth and cooking, but it came at a price. Clean, fresh air inside a peasant home was a luxury few enjoyed regularly. Then add animals. Many peasant families lived very close to livestock because animals were wealth, survival, and food security. Chickens wandered freely. Goats and sheep stayed nearby. In winter, smaller animals were sometimes brought closer to homes for warmth and protection. Practical, yes, pleasant for hygiene, not remotely. Animal waste, damp fur, and barn odors became part of daily life. Mud made everything worse. Medieval roads were rarely clean, dry paths. Most village streets became muddy mixtures of dirt, rainwater, straw, manure, spilled food, and waste. Every footstep could carry that mixture back inside homes. Boots tracked filth onto floors. Children played around it. Carts rolled through it. Rain transformed streets into thick brown sludge that seemed determined to cling to everything it touched. And yes, human waste was also a major issue. Modern sewage systems quietly remove one of civilization's least glamorous but greatest achievements. Medieval towns lacked such systems. Waste disposal varied wildly depending on wealth and location. In villages, waste might be dumped into pits or fields. In towns, things could become far more chaotic and far more disgusting very quickly. Some people used chamber pots at night. Convenient, somewhat. The problem came afterward. Those pots needed emptying somewhere, sometimes into cesspits, sometimes into drains, sometimes directly into streets, especially in crowded urban areas. Imagine waking early in a medieval town and hearing someone above shout a warning before tossing waste outside. Suddenly, walking below windows became a risky activity. Even where formal latrines existed, smells remained powerful. Waste accumulated fast in dense settlements. Hot weather made odors stronger. Rain could spread contamination. Flies gathered eagerly. The closer people lived together, the worse the problem became. Medieval cities especially could smell overwhelming to modern noses because waste, animals, industry, cooking, and thousands of bodies all existed in tightly packed spaces. Markets added another layer of sensory chaos. At first glance, medieval markets seem lively and charming, but smelled the reality. Fish left in sun, raw meat hanging for hours, animal blood from butchers, vegetable scraps rotting nearby, wet leather, sweat from crowds, smoke from cooking fires. Markets were economic centers, but also major odor factories. Butchers in particular created intense smells because slaughter generated blood, entrails, fat, and waste requiring disposal. Even with cleaning efforts, the smell of fresh slaughter lingered. Tanneries were even worse. Processing animal hides into leather required substances modern people would find revolting. Urine, lime, rotting tissue, and chemical mixtures created some of the worst industrial smells in medieval life. Tannery workers became infamous for this. And yet, here is the fascinating part. People adapted. Human senses adjust to constant stimuli, just as modern city residents stopped noticing traffic noise. Medieval people likely stopped noticing many background smells unless something unusually strong appeared. What would shock us may have felt normal to them. That does not mean the smells disappeared. It simply means the human brain learned to filter them for survival. Still, there were moments when smell became impossible to ignore. Summer was one of them. Heat magnified everything. Sweat increased. Waste decomposed faster. Food spoiled quicker. Water stagnated. Flies multiplied. Animals smelled stronger. Rooms became stuffier. Without air conditioning, escaping heat was already difficult. Add hygiene problems, and summer could become brutally uncomfortable in ways modern people rarely experience. This brings us to another major hygiene challenge: laundry, because staying personally clean is difficult enough. But keeping clothes, blankets, and bedding clean in the Middle Ages required huge labor. And since most people were already exhausted from survival, laundry was not a simple, weekly routine like today. It was work that demanded time, water, effort, and physical strength. Laundry in the medieval world was not the simple task we know today. There was no washing machine quietly spinning in the background while you did something else. Washing clothes meant physical labor from beginning to end. Water had to be collected manually, often from wells, rivers, or communal sources. That water then needed carrying in heavy buckets, and even before washing began, your body was already tired. Soap existed, but not in the convenient, fragrant bars we use now. Medieval cleaning mixtures often used animal fat, ash, lye, or rough homemade soap. Some worked surprisingly well. Others were harsh on skin and fabric. Washing clothing meant soaking, beating, scrubbing, wringing, rinsing, and drying. Every step demanded strength. Heavy wet wool garments became especially difficult because soaked wool could feel incredibly heavy in human hands. This is why clothes were not washed constantly. People often cleaned visible dirt, brushed garments, aired fabrics, and repaired damage instead of fully washing everything regularly. Underlayers made of linen were important because linen could absorb sweat and oils more effectively and could be washed more often than expensive outer garments. Even so, clean clothing was never guaranteed, especially for poorer families struggling simply to survive. Blankets and bedding were even harder to clean. Think about a straw mattress inside a small, smoky house. Dust settled onto it. Smoke settled into it. Sweat soaked into it. Fleas lived inside it. Skin flakes collected over time. And unlike modern mattresses with washable covers and protective layers, medieval bedding offered countless hiding places for parasites. Cleaning bedding thoroughly required effort. Many households simply could not spare often. Now let us discuss hair. Modern hair care is almost absurdly luxurious compared to medieval standards. Shampoo, conditioner, oils, brushes, hair dryers, treatments none existed in familiar form. People still groomed hair because appearance mattered, but keeping hair truly clean was difficult. Smoke, sweat, dirt, and natural oils built up quickly, especially among laborers spending long hours outside or near fire. Long hair could become particularly challenging. Women often kept hair covered for modesty and practicality, but covering hair did not eliminate sweat or oil. Head coverings themselves absorbed odor and dirt over time. Combing helped remove debris and distribute oils, and combs were important hygiene tools. But combing alone could not prevent every problem. One persistent enemy remained common across nearly all social classes: lice. Few words make modern people scratch their heads faster. Lice were one of the most widespread hygiene problems in pre-modern life. These tiny parasites thrived wherever humans gathered closely, and washing remained limited. They lived in hair, clothing seams, bedding, and shared fabrics. Once they spread through a household, removing them became extremely difficult. Combing helped. Picking eggs out helped. But complete elimination was hard. Children especially suffered because they spent time close together and had less patience for grooming. Families sometimes sat together, removing lice manually from hair and clothing. It sounds unpleasant because it was, yet for many medieval people this was ordinary routine rather than shocking horror. Parasites were not rare disasters. They were recurring annoyances woven into everyday life. That may be one of the hardest truths for modern people to imagine. And lice were not alone. Fleas were everywhere. If a household had animals nearby, fleas found opportunities quickly. Dogs brought them, cats brought them, straw bedding welcomed them, floors with cracks sheltered them. Once established, fleas multiplied fast. Nights became miserable as biting insects interrupted sleep repeatedly. You might finally drift into exhausted sleep only to wake scratching legs, arms, or torso in irritation. This brings us to one deeply uncomfortable reality. Medieval hygiene was not only about dirt or smell, it was also about itching. Constant itching, flea bites, lice irritation, dry skin from smoke, rough wool rubbing against skin, sweat trapped beneath layers of fabric. These created non-stop, low-level discomfort. Not unbearable agony, but the kind of constant irritation that slowly wears down patience and comfort over time. Dental hygiene presents another fascinating and slightly terrifying topic. Contrary to myth, medieval people did clean teeth in various ways. Some used cloth, sticks, powders, herbs, or abrasive mixtures to scrub teeth. They understood that bad teeth caused suffering, but without modern dentistry, prevention and treatment remained limited. Once decay or infection began, things could become painful very quickly. Diet played a major role here. Bread was central to life, especially for ordinary people. But medieval bread was rougher than modern bread. Tiny grit from milling stones sometimes ended up in flour. Over years of chewing, this gradually wore teeth down. Add sugars from honey, fruits, and other foods, along with limited dental care, and tooth damage became common. Pain often arrived slowly, then all at once. A severe tooth infection in medieval times could become a nightmare. Imagine trying to sleep while every heartbeat sends pain through your jaw. No ibuprofen, no antibiotics, no emergency dentist. Maybe herbs, maybe alcohol, maybe prayer. Extraction existed, but crude tooth pulling with primitive tools was terrifying and painful. Many endured agony for long periods because treatment itself could feel nearly as frightening as the pain. And then there was breath. Yes, bad breath existed, and likely far more often than modern people prefer imagining. Tooth decay, gum disease, infrequent washing, strong-smelling food, smoke, exposure, and digestive issues all contributed. In a world where people lived close together, face-to-face conversation happened constantly. Social etiquette still mattered, but there were limits to what anyone could realistically control. Yet despite all this, cleanliness still carried social value. This is important. Medieval people were not indifferent to hygiene. They associated cleanliness with dignity, respectability, morality, and status. Nobles valued scented oils, perfumes, clean linens, and pleasant presentation when possible. Religious spaces often emphasized ritual washing. Even peasants appreciated cleanliness whenever circumstances allowed. The issue was rarely desire. The issue was practicality. That may be the biggest misconception of all. Medieval people were not dirty because they loved dirt. They were dirty because daily life made cleanliness expensive, exhausting, and difficult to maintain. Survival came first. When your priority is feeding a family through winter, personal comfort naturally drops down the list. Clean hair matters less when crops are failing. Fresh bedding matters less when food is scarce. And just when you think hygiene could not become more complicated, another problem appears: water itself. Because the very thing needed to stay clean could sometimes make you sick. And that created one of the strangest contradictions of medieval life. The more you needed water, the more dangerous water could become. Water, the very thing required for cleanliness, was also one of the greatest hidden dangers of medieval life. Modern people rarely think twice before turning on a tap. Clear water appears instantly, filtered and generally safe to drink. Medieval people had no such luxury. Every bucket of water came from somewhere: physical wells, rivers, streams, rain collection, or public sources, and every source carried potential risk. A clear river did not automatically mean clean water. That is one of the most dangerous assumptions humans can make. Water could look fresh while carrying invisible contamination from animals, waste, rotting matter, or upstream settlements. Medieval people did not understand bacteria or viruses the way we do now. They knew bad water could make people sick, but the exact reasons remained mysterious and inconsistent. Imagine a village built near a stream. At first, this sounds ideal. Easy water access, convenient washing, livestock can drink nearby. But now imagine upstream, someone washing dirty clothes, cleaning animal remains, or dumping waste. Suddenly, the same stream providing life becomes a source of sickness. And because contamination often remained invisible, danger could spread long before anyone understood something was wrong. Wells were often safer than surface water, but not always. Poorly maintained wells could become contaminated too. Dead animals, leaking waste pits, flooding, and simple neglect could affect water quality. A single contaminated water source could impact an entire community. If many families depended on the same well, illness could spread through daily life quietly, one cup at a time, before anyone recognized a pattern. This created a strange relationship with water. People needed it constantly, yet complete trust was difficult. Drinking uncertain water could cause stomach sickness, vomiting, fever, or worse. That is partly why weak ale and small beer became common daily drinks in many places. Contrary to myth, people did drink water, but lightly fermented beverages sometimes offered safer alternatives because the brewing process could reduce certain dangers. Public baths present another fascinating contradiction. Many people imagine medieval Europe as a place where nobody bathed publicly, but that is not entirely true. Bathhouses existed in many towns, especially earlier in the Middle Ages and in urban centers. Some offered hot baths, steam rooms, and washing facilities. In theory, this sounds surprisingly civilized and pleasant. In practice, things could become complicated. A public bath sounds relaxing until you consider maintenance. Water had to be heated. Tubs had to be cleaned. Large numbers of people used shared facilities. Standards varied enormously depending on region, wealth, and management. Some bathhouses were respected community spaces. Others gained reputations for questionable cleanliness, rowdy behavior, or activities extending far beyond simple bathing. Human nature has always been creative. Despite these complications, bathing could still feel wonderful compared to ordinary village life. Imagine weeks of sweat, dust, smoke, and labor finally washing away in warm water. Muscles relax, skin softens, dirt loosens. For a brief moment, life feels luxurious. That pleasure helps explain why bath culture remained popular in many areas despite periodic criticism from religious authorities or concerns about morality. Over time, however, public attitudes shifted. Disease outbreaks, moral concerns, changing social habits, and fear of shared spaces affected bathing culture. During periods of plague, crowded bathhouses could suddenly feel less appealing. Even without understanding germs, people recognized that sickness spread where people gathered closely. Shared water, steam, and contact created anxiety, especially during times when disease already haunted daily life. And disease truly haunted medieval cities. If villages smelled unpleasant, cities could become overwhelming. Picture narrow streets packed with people, animals, carts, workshops, markets, waste, smoke, and noise. Thousands lived close together with limited sanitation. Waste removal struggled to keep pace with population growth. Every extra resident increased pressure on water, food, streets, and disposal systems already under strain. Cities also concentrated specialized trades, and some were notoriously filthy. Tanners processed hides using foul mixtures. Dyers worked with chemicals and pigments. Butchers handled blood and animal remains. Smiths filled air with smoke and heat. Bakers ran hot ovens constantly. Fishmongers worked with highly perishable goods. Each profession served society, yet together they created powerful layers of smell, waste, and environmental stress. Summer in a medieval city could become brutal. Heat accelerated rot. Food spoiled faster. Waste decomposed quicker. Smells intensified. Flies multiplied everywhere. Streets became sticky, muddy, or foul depending on weather. Even wealthy people inside better homes could not fully escape the city around them. Odor travels, noise travels, disease travels, money improved comfort, but urban life still exposed everyone to broader public conditions. The rich, of course, had advantages. Nobles and wealthy merchants could afford more clothing, more linen, servants for laundry, perfumes, scented oils, better bathing arrangements, and private chambers, cleanliness became another marker of status. Wearing fresh linen or pleasant scents signaled wealth because maintaining such comfort required resources. But even wealth could not fully eliminate medieval hygiene problems. Perfume deserves a special mention because smell mattered socially. Wealthier people used herbs, flowers, incense, oils, and scented materials to improve personal fragrance or mask unpleasant odors. Lavender, rosemary, rosewater, and other scents were valued. But perfume in the medieval world often functioned less like modern luxury and more like strategic defense and effort to create pockets of pleasantness inside environments where unpleasant smells remained unavoidable. And then came plague. Nothing exposed the limits of medieval hygiene more brutally than epidemic disease. When plague spread through Europe, fear around cleanliness, smell, air, and contamination intensified dramatically. People searched desperately for explanations. Some blamed foul air, some blamed divine punishment, some blamed bad smells themselves. Since disease often appeared where sanitation was poor, the connection felt logical, even when the true mechanisms remained unknown. This led to fascinating but tragic attempts at protection. People carried herbs near noses. They burned incense. They avoided foul-smelling areas. They believed pleasant smells could defend against sickness carried by corrupted air. In a strange way, this was partly understandable. Bad sanitation often did correlate with disease. They simply lacked the scientific framework to understand why observation existed. Explanation lagged behind. By now, one truth becomes clear. Medieval hygiene was not a simple story of clean or dirty. It was a constant struggle against environment, labor, limited technology, and invisible dangers. People tried. They washed when possible. They groomed themselves. They valued cleanliness. But the world around them constantly pushed back. And nowhere was that struggle more personal than inside the human body itself. Because even if you managed clean clothes, decent water, and occasional baths, your body still produced sweat, oil, waste, sickness, and odor every single day. And managing those natural realities without modern hygiene products was exhausting in ways we barely appreciate today. Perhaps the most unavoidable part of hygiene was the human body itself. No matter how much effort someone invested, the body constantly worked against perfect cleanliness. Skin produced oils. Sweat cooled the body. Hair trapped dust. Feet collected dirt. Hands touched everything. And in a world filled with labor, smoke, mud, and animals, staying fresh for long was almost impossible. Cleanliness was not a permanent state. It was temporary. Let us begin with sweat. Modern people often associate body odor with poor hygiene alone, but sweat itself is natural. The difference is that we have daily showers, deodorants, breathable fabrics, and climate control. Medieval people had almost none of these advantages. Physical labor dominated life. Farmers worked in sun. Blacksmiths worked near extreme heat. Bakers stood beside ovens. Sweat was not occasional. It was constant. And sweat alone does not smell strongly at first. The real smell develops when sweat interacts with bacteria on skin and clothing over time. That means the same wool tunic worn repeatedly during heavy labor gradually trapped moisture, salt, skin oils, and bacteria over days, odor built layer by layer, without regular deep washing. Clothing effectively stored the memory of every exhausting workday within its fibers. Wool, though useful for warmth, made this even more complicated. It insulated well and protected against cold, but thick wool also trapped heat and sweat. During winter, this helped survival. During warmer months, it could feel heavy and uncomfortable. Imagine working under sunlight while wearing layered wool garments, sweating continuously, and knowing that by evening those same clothes would still cling to your body, carrying the entire day with them. Feet suffered terribly too. Medieval footwear was practical but far from ideal by modern standards. Many shoes offered limited cushioning and support. Roads were rough, muddy, stony, and uneven. People walked constantly. Farmers stood for hours. Merchants traveled long distances. Pilgrims crossed entire regions on foot. Feet sweated inside leather shoes or remained damp after rain, creating perfect conditions for odor, blisters, and fungal problems. Blisters were not just painful, they affected hygiene too. Broken skin collected dirt easily. Moist environments slowed healing. Long walking worsened friction. Without clean socks and modern treatments, even small foot injuries could become miserable. Imagine a sore blister rubbing against rough leather every step for days. Now add sweat, mud, and limited washing. Suddenly, something small becomes a daily source of discomfort and infection risk. Hands reveal another overlooked reality. Medieval hands worked constantly. Digging, chopping, sewing, kneading dough, carrying water, grooming animals, repairing tools. Hands touched everything. They also touched waste, dirt, blood, raw food, ash, manure, and countless unclean surfaces throughout the day. Hand washing happened, yes, but not with antibacterial soap at every sink. Clean hands rarely stayed clean for long. Nails trapped dirt especially well. After farming, gardening, leatherwork, cooking, or butchering, grime settled beneath nails and into skin lines. Repeated washing with rough soaps or ash cleaned some of it, but calloused working hands naturally held traces of labor. Smooth, soft hands often signaled privilege because they implied freedom from constant manual work. In many ways, hands quietly revealed social status without words. Women faced additional hygiene challenges tied to childbirth and menstruation, topics often ignored in romantic versions of history. Managing menstruation without modern sanitary products required cloth, absorbent materials, improvisation, and constant effort. Privacy was limited. Laundry was hard. Clean replacement materials were not always plentiful. It demanded resilience and practical knowledge passed through generations, often without comfort or convenience. Childbirth presented even greater risks. Giving birth was physically exhausting and medically dangerous in any era, but medieval hygiene conditions added extra challenges. Clean surfaces, sterilized tools, and infection control were limited. Midwives relied heavily on experience, herbs, practical skill, and tradition. Sometimes births went well. Sometimes infection followed. The absence of modern sanitation made even successful deliveries far riskier than most people today realize. Babies created another constant hygiene challenge. Modern parents already know infants generate astonishing amounts of mess. Now remove disposable diapers, baby wipes, detergents, and washing machines. Suddenly, childcare becomes far more demanding. Cloths required washing repeatedly. Bedding needed cleaning. Accidents happened constantly. Babies cried, spilled, vomited, and needed endless attention. Mothers and caregivers handled all of this alongside countless other responsibilities. Elderly people and the sick also depended heavily on others for hygiene. When illness reduced mobility, basic washing became difficult. Changing clothes became difficult. Managing waste became difficult. Families often provided care personally. This created emotional and physical burdens, especially in small, crowded homes with limited resources. Hygiene was not only personal effort, it was deeply connected to caregiving, family duty, and community support. Then there was shaving and grooming. Facial hair varied by region, class, and period, but grooming remained important for many men. Barbers existed in towns and often performed more than haircuts. They shaved beards, cut hair, and sometimes handled medical procedures like bloodletting or tooth extraction. Yes, the same person trimming your beard might also pull your tooth. Medieval professional versatility was impressive and slightly terrifying. Barbershops became social spaces too. News spread there, gossip spread there, politics spread there. But hygiene standards depended heavily on tools and practices available. Razors were sharp but primitive by modern standards. Small cuts happened easily. Reused tools carried obvious risks, though people lacked germ theory to understand them fully. Even routine grooming could sometimes introduce infection through tiny, unnoticed wounds. At this point, you may wonder how medieval people tolerated all of this. The answer is surprisingly simple. Humans normalize whatever surrounds them daily. The body adapts, the mind adapts, expectations adapt. Medieval people did not compare life to modern bathrooms because those bathrooms did not exist. Their standard of clean enough reflected what was realistically possible inside their world, not ours. And perhaps that is the most important lesson of all. Medieval hygiene was not about laziness or ignorance. It was about limits of water, technology, labor, medicine, and infrastructure. People worked within those limits as best they could. Some succeeded better than others. But everyone lived inside a world where staying truly clean required effort that modern people barely need to think about. Which brings us to the final question. After everything we have seen, smoke-filled homes, parasites, muddy roads, contaminated water, body odor, disease, and endless labor, just how miserable was medieval hygiene really? The answer may be even more surprising than you expect. So after everything we have explored tonight, we return to the question that brought us here. Was medieval hygiene truly as terrible as modern people imagine? The answer is both yes and no. Yes, because by modern standards, daily cleanliness was extraordinarily difficult, but also no, because the common idea that medieval people simply ignored hygiene is unfair. The reality was far more complex and far more human. Medieval people absolutely understood the value of cleanliness. They knew clean water felt better than dirty water. They knew fresh clothes felt better than sweaty clothes. They knew pleasant smells were preferable to foul ones. They knew wounds needed cleaning. They knew rot, filth, and decay were dangerous. They may not have understood microscopic germs, but they understood discomfort, sickness, and visible contamination very well. The real problem was not knowledge. The problem was access. Cleanliness requires systems. It requires infrastructure, resources, time, labor, and technology. Modern hygiene feels easy because invisible systems support us constantly. Pipes bring water, drains remove waste, factories make soap, electricity powers washing machines, hospitals treat infection. Entire industries quietly protect our cleanliness every single day without us noticing. Medieval people had none of that hidden support. Every clean shirt required work. Every bucket of water required effort. Every warm bath required preparation. Every clean floor required labor. Every attempt to reduce smell required time and resources. Cleanliness was not something you passively enjoyed. It was something actively fought for, and often survival needs came first. This becomes even clearer when we compare rich and poor. A wealthy noble certainly lived cleaner than a poor peasant. Better housing, more servants, cleaner linens, private chambers, perfumes, and improved bathing all helped. Yet even nobles still lived inside a medieval world. Their castles remained cold. Their cities still smelled. Disease still spread. Fleas still existed. Wealth reduced discomfort, but did not eliminate the era itself. That may be the strangest truth. No one truly escaped the limits of the age. A king might sleep on embroidered linen instead of straw, but he still breathed medieval air. He still relied on medieval medicine. He still faced medieval disease. He still lived in a world without antibiotics, plumbing, sanitation systems, or scientific germ theory. Luxury changed comfort levels, not the fundamental realities of life. And yet, despite all this, people still found beauty in daily life. This matters. History becomes distorted when we only focus on suffering. Medieval homes, though smoky, were also places of family warmth. Villages, though muddy, were also communities filled with relationships. Bathing, though difficult, could feel deeply refreshing. Clean linen, though rare, could feel luxurious. Even small comforts often carried huge emotional value. Modern comfort often makes us forget how revolutionary cleanliness really is. A 5-minute shower today would feel magical to much of human history. Toothpaste would feel miraculous. Deodorant would feel revolutionary. Antibiotics would feel divine. Even flushing a toilet would probably seem like impossible sorcery to someone from the year 1400. The ordinary comforts surrounding us are built upon centuries of slow progress. That is perhaps the biggest lesson hidden inside tonight's journey. Hygiene is civilization made visible. Clean water systems, waste disposal, sanitation, medicine, soap production, and public health transformed human life more than most people realize. They did not simply make us smell better. They increased life expectancy, reduced suffering, prevented disease, and changed daily comfort on a massive scale. So the next time you step into a warm shower, brush your teeth, wash your hands, or crawl into clean bed sheets, remember how extraordinary those ordinary moments truly are. Remember the smoky cottages, muddy roads, contaminated wells, lice-filled bedding, and endless labor of medieval Europe. Remember how much effort cleanliness once demanded from every single person. And perhaps take a moment to appreciate something beautifully simple. Clean water, fresh air, warm soap, soft towels, a clean bed, because for millions of people across medieval Europe, those things were not daily expectations. They were luxuries, rare luxuries, hard-earned luxuries, and often impossible luxuries. So yes, medieval hygiene was worse than most people think. Not because people were careless, not because they did not care, but because staying clean in the Middle Ages was a constant, exhausting battle against the limits of the world around them. And surviving that battle every single day required something modern people rarely need to think about: endurance. And so, as our journey through the muddy streets, smoky homes, and crowded towns of medieval Europe comes to an end, night slowly falls once more. The village grows quiet. Firelight flickers behind wooden shutters. Smoke rises softly into cold evening air. Somewhere nearby, a dog settles to sleep. The day is finally over. Inside a small cottage, a family prepares for another night. Their clothes smell faintly of smoke. Their hands carry traces of labor. Their bedding is rough. Their world is imperfect. But for tonight, work is finished, and that is enough. Good night, and sleep well. There is one final misconception about medieval hygiene worth discussing before we sleep. The idea that everyone in the Middle Ages smelled equally terrible all the time is not entirely true. Human beings are surprisingly adaptable, and medieval people constantly searched for ways to improve comfort, smell better, and maintain dignity, even inside a difficult and often unforgiving world. Take herbs, for example. Medieval households frequently used fragrant plants for practical and sensory reasons. Lavender, rosemary, mint, sage, and other herbs were hung indoors, placed near bedding, or used in washing water. These plants did not magically solve hygiene problems, but they helped soften harsh smells and created small islands of freshness inside smoky, crowded homes. Flowers also played a role, especially among wealthier households. Rosewater was prized in many regions for washing hands, face, or fabrics. Scented oils could be applied lightly to skin or hair. Religious ceremonies used incense, which filled churches and sacred spaces with rich fragrance. Pleasant smells were associated with purity, holiness, wealth, and refinement, while foul smells often symbolized decay or corruption. This connection between smell and morality ran surprisingly deep. Many medieval people believed bad odors were not merely unpleasant, but dangerous. Rotten smells from waste, decay, or sickness seemed closely connected to disease and death. Without germ theory, this belief made sense. Again and again, people observed that foul environments often produced illness. They reached the wrong scientific explanation, but not an irrational conclusion. Even simple routines mattered. Washing hands before meals, combing hair, trimming nails, airing bedding, sweeping floors, changing linen. When possible, these small acts helped create order and comfort. In a world where major cleanliness was difficult, small maintenance became extremely valuable. Tiny routines could make daily life feel more manageable and preserve dignity in harsh conditions. And dignity mattered enormously. This is something history sometimes forgets when talking about ordinary people. Peasants were not just dirty workers surviving in mud. They were parents, spouses, neighbors, believers, craftsmen, and human beings with pride. They wanted to look respectable at church. They wanted to appear presentable during festivals. They cared how others saw them, just as we do today. Festivals often became moments of relative cleanliness and pride. People wore better clothing when possible. Faces were washed carefully. Hair was groomed. Garments were brushed. Shoes were cleaned as much as practical. Even if daily life was rough, special occasions offered chances to present the best version of oneself. Cleanliness was deeply connected to self-respect and social belonging. Ironically, modern people sometimes romanticize medieval life because of castles, candlelight, and handmade simplicity. And yes, there was beauty. There was craftsmanship, community, resilience, and meaning. But there was also sweat in wool clothing, smoke in lungs, parasites in bedding, and mud on nearly everything. Both truths existed together. That contrast is what makes history fascinating. The medieval world was neither a fantasy paradise nor endless misery. It was human life under different limitations. People laughed, loved, worked, prayed, argued, celebrated, and suffered within the conditions available to them. Hygiene was just one part of that larger story, but it reveals something powerful about civilization itself. Comfort is rarely accidental. It is built slowly across generations. So perhaps the greatest takeaway from tonight's journey is gratitude. Gratitude for invisible systems, gratitude for soap, gratitude for toothbrushes, gratitude for warm showers, gratitude for clean drinking water, gratitude for fresh sheets. Things that feel ordinary to us would feel miraculous to much of history. The Middle Ages remind us how extraordinary, ordinary comfort really is. And now, as the final embers of a medieval hearth glow softly in the darkness, the village settles into silence. Smoke rises one last time through the roof. A tired farmer closes his eyes. Somewhere, rain taps gently against wooden walls. Night has arrived again. The world is quiet, and thankfully, far cleaner than it once was. If you could travel back to medieval Europe for just one day, the first shock probably would not come from what you saw. Castles, wooden cottages, muddy roads, horses, and candlelight might even feel strangely beautiful at first. The real shock would arrive the moment you breathed in deeply. Your modern senses would instantly notice what medieval people had long learned to ignore. The smell of an entire world built without sanitation. That smell would tell countless stories at once. Smoke from morning fires rising inside cramped cottages. Damp wool drying near a hearth. Mud mixed with animal manure under boots. Fresh bread baking nearby. Sweat from laborers already working since sunrise. A horse passing through the road. A butcher preparing meat for market. Human life, raw and unfiltered, existing together in ways modern cities carefully separate. And perhaps that is what makes medieval hygiene so fascinating. It reveals the physical reality of history. We often imagine the past through paintings, movies, or beautiful illustrations. We see crowns, armor, castles, and cathedrals. But real history was lived through bodies. Bodies that sweated, bodies that got sick, bodies that smelled, bodies that needed water, warmth, sleep, and care. Hygiene brings history back to human scale. It also reminds us how fragile comfort truly is. Civilization often feels permanent when you live inside it. Clean water flows, waste disappears, medicine exists, and comfort feels normal. But remove just a few invisible systems and daily life changes dramatically. Medieval people were not living in a strange fantasy world. They were living only a few technological steps behind us, yet those steps changed everything. One missing pipe changes water access. One missing drain changes sanitation. One missing scientific discovery changes medicine. One missing machine changes laundry. One missing invention changes survival itself. That is why studying medieval hygiene is surprisingly powerful. It shows how countless small innovations slowly transformed human life into something safer, cleaner, and less exhausting. And still, despite every hardship, medieval people endured. They raised families, they built villages, they constructed cathedrals so vast they still inspire awe centuries later. They survived winters, plagues, famines, and brutal labor. They found joy in festivals, warmth in family, comfort in faith, and meaning in routine. Even in dirty, difficult conditions, life continued. Human resilience continued. That may be the most beautiful lesson hidden beneath tonight's unpleasant topic. Humans adapt. Humans survive. Give people mud, smoke, fleas, and hardship, and somehow they still create songs, stories, friendships, and hope. They still laugh at jokes. They still celebrate weddings. They still dream about better futures. Even in difficult worlds, humanity keeps building meaning. So when we say medieval hygiene was miserable, that is true. It was exhausting, it was uncomfortable. It was often disgusting by modern standards. But it was also ordinary life for millions of real people who did not wake up thinking they were living in a terrible era. They simply woke up, got dressed, worked, loved, struggled, and slept just like us. The difference was not humanity. The difference was comfort. And comfort, more than almost anything else, separates our world from theirs. Tonight, before sleep takes over, maybe appreciate one small thing around you. Your clean pillow, your fresh air, your soap, your toothbrush, your clean clothes, your warm shower. These ordinary things are miracles of modern civilization. Miracles so common we barely notice them. But history notices. The Middle Ages notice, and if a tired medieval villager could see your bathroom tonight, he might genuinely believe you lived inside a palace. So, as our final candle burns low and the medieval village fades into darkness, the fire grows quiet, the muddy streets empty, the market falls silent, the smoke slowly disappears into the cold night air. A farmer lies down on rough straw bedding. A mother pulls a wool blanket over her child. A candle flickers once, twice, then darkness, and somewhere, centuries later, you lie in a clean bed hearing this story. Safe, warm, comfortable, far from the fleas, far from the smoke, far from the mud, and perhaps just a little more grateful. Good night, sleep well, and thank you for joining this journey through boring history for sleep.